can you help me to honor and to welcome our brother Pablo Alvarado?
Buenos días. Muchas gracias por esa presentación. Good morning. Thank you for that beautiful presentation. Compañeros y compañeras, I just want to tell you that I speak English as a second language, so if I mess things up, blame it on my ESL skills. And when I asked Reverend Cañas what he wanted me to share here, he said, come and speak your mind. So if I say things that are too over the top, you can blame Reverend Francisco Cañas. Is that okay? So I am going to speak my mind. And he asked me to share some of my thinking about the moment that this moment of difficulty that our country is going through. And of course, I don't claim to possess the truth. I'm an organizer, I'm an activist. And because of my upbringing as an immigrant, obviously my understanding of reality is biased. So I guess nobody possesses the absolute truth, right? So, but before I share my thinking about what's happening in our country right now, I want to share a few things about myself and my organization, because I think it's part of the American story, it's part of the American experience. I am from a small village in El Salvador of roughly 700 people. And my parents were both peasants. I grew up in the countryside, no electricity, no running water. The school that I went to had only up to 4th grade. If you wanted to go to school, you had to walk to the nearest city. When I was 10, the village where I grew up went into this conflict, a very tense moment, because it was in the middle of the Civil War. And the village was split. That's what happens when you have civil war. You have, parents at the other end of the political spectrum of their kids. That's exactly what happened in my family. My father was a member of the paramilitary organizations, and his kids were on the other side of the political spectrum. But it was a reality that we had there. The village was split the same way. There was only one place in the village where you could play soccer, because it was in the hills. And it belonged to the main landowner. The landowner decided to sell the property to the most powerful family in the village. And the most powerful family in the village had members in the military, including some who were part of the death squads. So when they bought the property where the soccer field was, the community came together and went and spoke to the family and said, hey, can we reach an agreement here? Would you lease this property to us so that our youth can continue playing soccer? And by the way, the youth that belonged to that powerful family also plays soccer. And it was the only place in the village that the young people had to, essentially have a good time. And it was the center of culture in the village was the soccer field. So the community negotiated, and the following day, the family didn't honor the agreement, and they brought in the machinery and they began preparing the land to grow crops. So they did it while all of the peasants were working in the hacienda for the landowner. So when the peasants came back, my father, who was a right-wing paramilitary man, brought together the entire community, and I was 10 years old. And he decided to lead the occupation of the land. Now, he didn't call it occupation, okay? But that's essentially what it was. It was a radical stand that he took. This right-wing man taking a radical stand, invading a private property. I was 10 years old. And it was so tense, people with machetes, with guns, interacting in the soccer field. We were very close to a massacre. So I became intellectually curious and aware of the circumstances that my people in El Salvador were going through, precisely because of that conflict. Later, I joined a study circle with Jesuit seminarians when I was 12. And I learned about the teachings of Monsignor Romero and his preferential option for the poor and the dispossessed. And of course, at that time, adopting such a stand was deadly. But many people did it, including Monsignor Romero. And I am so happy that I joined that study circle, because there's nothing that I enjoy more than having that preferential option for the poor. And I plan to die preferring the poor while loving our adversary. I think it's possible to prefer the poor and still love those that oppress us. And I still think that the poor have the power and the ability and the persuasion to make the oppressor understand the breadth, the reach of their oppressions. So that's when I began my political work, when I was 10, 10 years old. So in 1990, when, in the Civil War was almost over, my last day of college, I was 22. I got home and my family was together because that morning, my brother, my youngest brother, who was 17, received a death threat. And the family was coming together to decide what my brother was going to do. And the options that he had were the following. Either he joined the movement, the armed struggle, because those were the choices. Either he joined the armed struggle or he would leave the country. And the family decided that it was time for him to move up north and come to the States. When I got home, they said, hey, you got to go with your younger brother. So it's not like I had a choice. So the following day, we left to the United States. So that's how I ended up in Los Angeles, and I did all kinds of jobs, from gardening, painting. I worked in factories. I can tell you that I know how to build a house from scratch. I know drywalling, painting, you name it. And I'm so happy that I did all of that because I was able to meet other workers who were doing the same thing. And I was able to meet other people who wanted to help workers. And together with other colleagues from Mexico and Central America, we began organizing. We began visiting the day labor corners, the places where men stand to solicit work every day, who are highly visible. Everybody sees them. And these men defy every single obstacle that they may have. I mean, it's not easy to stand on a sidewalk and offer the only thing that you possess, and that is your labor. It's not easy to stand there and say, here I am, with pride in your, with your forehead high, and say, here I am, come and hire me. Workers face many uncertainties. They don't know if they're going to get hired. They don't know if they're going to get paid for the work that they do. They don't know if they're going to have an injury at the workplace and if they are going to receive proper medical care or not. They don't know if the police officers are going to show up or the security guards are going to target them. And they don't know if white supremacist groups are going to come and attack them, both verbally and physically. Yet, they stand there with pride, offering their labor in the middle of these uncertainties. So this is why in 1996, we decided to connect people across the country who were reaching out to this group of workers. And the way we did it was really fun. In 1996, there was a soccer team from Los Angeles that went and had a soccer exchange with people in Northern California. And it was so beautiful because the men gathered in the middle of the soccer field, and then in a natural process of sharing, they began asking each other, so what do you do when an employer doesn't pay you? What do you do when the police ask you to leave the corner? And they began exchanging ideas. And that's exactly how my organization was born, in the middle of a soccer field. And that's exactly how I gained my conscience because of soccer. So it was beautiful. That's the way Andilon started. And ever since, my organization has defended the right of workers to stand on a sidewalk. We began a campaign to counteract a series of anti-day labor solicitation ordinances that had been enacted by localities. So in other words, some local governments made it illegal for a person to stand on a sidewalk and offer their labor, or for an employer to come and hire the workers. They made it illegal. We challenged about 20 municipalities across the country, and in 2012, the Supreme Court decided not to take an appeal by the city of Redondo Beach. And ever since, day laborers have the right to stand on a sidewalk. They earned it. The workers themselves were the plaintiffs in these 20 lawsuits. So yes, workers can assert their right. Throughout these years, we have recovered millions of dollars in unpaid wages, from Farmingville to Phoenix, from Agoura Hills to Denver. And we have confronted and defeated the white supremacist groups that have attacked the day labor community, both verbally and physically. And as we fought, we have been able to develop the leadership skills of very humble people, day laborers and organizers. And yes, humble people can become agents of change, even if they don't know how to read and write. And I think that is what Jesus wanted. And I think that's where the convergence between my organization and the Methodists can find, I think, sync. Isn't that right? Yes. So ever since we've been able to, since my organization started, we've built 65 day labor worker centers. These are safe environments where workers come, they gather, and they wait for their potential employers to come and pick them up. And when they come, there is somebody there translating, making sure that there is transparency in the transaction between employer and employee. So that if the employee doesn't get paid, we know where to go. And if the employer is not satisfied with the work that the worker does, the employer knows where to go as well. So it's a win-and-win for everybody. So it's a dignified environment for both workers and the community to come together and do their negotiations. Some of these centers have been opened in the most hostile places. And yes, some of these centers are even funded by the so-called sanctuary cities that are under attack by this administration. So these are the worker centers. But the vast majority of the workers are not in centers because there's simply not enough resources to have one center in every single location in this country. So in 2004, we did a research and we found 700 locations where workers gather every single day. And I want to issue a challenge to you. Can we turn these worker centers into places of sanctuary? Can the protection of the church extend to this, not just the job center, but the corners? Can you adopt one of those corners to outreach the workers and bring the word of God, the message of justice to them, making sure that every worker there knows his or her rights? Can we do that together? And this is exactly what we need in the next 4 years or less. Well, okay, well, well, como decía mi abuelita, soñar no cuesta nada, ¿verdad? But it's a possibility, okay? So, so in the middle of this situation, brothers and sisters, we must not cave in to fear, because this is precisely what our adversaries want. For the last 15 years, we've been fighting for immigration reform with path to citizenship and political equality. And the fact is that there are 11 million undocumented migrants who are being denied justice and equality, despite the fact that every single day they toil in the fields, in the construction sites, and they make the beds in the most luxurious hotels of our country. Every day, migrant workers keep the gardens green, the houses painted, and they take care of children. And we do it with so much love. So, yes, America, it is an unfortunate reality. America enjoys and benefits from the fruits of undocumented labor, but America refuses to accept our humanity. And we got to change that, definitely. So instead of welcoming and embracing the labor that we bring, our adversaries, now emboldened by the new administration, have chosen to dehumanize, to humiliate, to belittle and stigmatize our community. I don't think that they have ever been interested in fixing the so-called broken immigration system. As you heard a few weeks ago, the president revealed a new initiative called, let's see if you're watching the news. Okay, RACE. He reveals the RACE Act. And essentially what the RACE Act does, it intends to bring down 50% legal migration. We're not talking about undocumented migration, but legal migration. And this is what I hope Reverend Cañas doesn't get in trouble, because I'm going to share my thinking about this, So I think that this latest plan is meant to deny people like me and like many of you a path to U.S. citizenship. The spectacle around the so-called RACE Act, in my view, is part of President Trump's campaign to deny equal rights to people of color in the United States. Obviously, while the proposal is unlikely to become law, it will surely divide Republicans. I hope it unites the Democrats. But most of all, I hope it reminds of all of us that we must stand together. The RACE Act reveals the real goal that Mr. Trump and our adversaries, the xenophobes, the nativists, have when it comes to the war on immigrants. I don't think that they are concerned about illegal immigration. I don't think that they are concerned about national sovereignty. I think that they are concerned about the inevitable emergence of a non-white majority. So everything the president is currently proposing and doing, from the wall to the attack on sanctuary cities to the campaign of terror to encourage self-deportation, in my view, is part of a broader agenda to preserve the legacy of white supremacy in our country. In my view, the goal is to make citizenship, the citizenship of non-whites, worth less. There's a historian by the name of Maine Guy who has a term for this. The concept of the alien citizen, meaning persons who are American citizens by virtue of their birth, but who are presumed to be foreign by the mainstream of American culture and sometimes by the state. While Mr. Trump claims that this Race Act is about the future, he's actually describing his real views about millions of people like me. And he's saying that my citizenship shouldn't be worth the same as his. So some might be tempted to see this reality that the Race Act is a moment when white nationalist rhetoric becomes white national policy. And that might be the case. But the truth is that the spectacle is a mere compensation for the fact that Mr. Trump is failing miserably. His inability to lead, and yes, an embarrassing capacity to command respect. Trump, I think he learned early on that he wins by capturing attention and instilling fear. These are the politics of fear at work. He wants white to fear non-white. He wants immigrants to fear police. He wants progressive politicians to fear his Department of Homeland Security. He wants sanctuary cities to fear the federal government. And while he has been effective in capturing attention via spectacle, the fact is that more and more people are beginning to see that there is very little substance to what he's proposing and a whole lot of racism. So I believe that Mr. Trump is actually scared of immigrants himself. I believe he's scared of our courage, of our ability to overcome obstacles that he cannot even comprehend because he has never sacrificed anything. He's scared of our ability to build things. He's scared of our ability to learn and grow. In short, he's scared of the simple fact that immigrants in all marginalized communities in the U.S. and our ability to overcome is the greatest source of strength and pride in this country. In short, Mr. Trump is scared of our courage. And like a frightened, immature child who becomes a bully, and he wants others to share in his fear. But of course, we won't let him do that. Can we commit to that? Yes. All right. So, as the Trump administration pushes his attrition through enforcement strategy, and I want to tell you this, I'm not a conspiracy theorist here, okay? But this is the deal. If you check the second paragraph of Arizona's infamous SB 1070, it clearly describes the strategy of our adversaries that has been embraced by Mitt Romney and now by Mr. Trump and taken it very far. One of the sentences in the SB 1070 law says what they intend, and that is to make life so miserable for migrants so that they pack their bags and live on their own, self-deportation. Well, guess what? The proponents of that doctrine are no longer marginal voices. They have the power of the federal government in their hands right now. If you don't believe me, just check and see who Stephen Bannon is, who Chris Kovac is. And yes, you all know who Jeff Sessions stands for and where he comes from. So the attrition through enforcement strategy is well and alive in our country right now. And yes, they are imposing dilemmas from the top down, I would say, and we have to resist some of these dilemmas. The idea that to make things better for all Americans, you have to make some suffer. The idea, we have to resist those ideas that you have to have winners and losers. We have to resist that dichotomy of the deserving versus the undeserving immigrant. Can we do that? So, and let's not accept deportation as a proper form of punishment. If people commit a crime, that's why there is a criminal justice system. And as unfair and unjust as it is, it's still there. Why do we have to subject people to deportation? It's not a proper form of punishment. So brothers and sisters, I just want to remind all of us actually, because sometimes I forget, what happens when people are perceived as less than human. Their suffering is tolerated as people become desensitized to pain. The outrageous politics of attrition are making people numb to the real suffering of migrants and refugees. And history is filled of similar examples. Sometimes we look away when the state brands someone a criminal. And when that happens, there is always the danger and that no one of us will be safe. When some are branded criminals, believe me, no one of us is safe. A few months ago, in the New York Times, Yale professor of philosophy, Jason Stanley, shared a powerful story. In the spring of 1936, Professor Stanley's grandmother, Ilse Stanley, had just returned from a long trip abroad, only to find many friends missing. This is in Germany. The Gestapo had taken her husband away to a concentration camp. And Ms. Stanley asked about the reason for her arrest. The answer was because he was a criminal with a record. He had paid 2 fines in court, one for speeding and another one for another traffic violations. And they told her that they finally could do what they wanted to do. And that was to get rid of all Jews with criminal records. And a traffic fine was a part of a criminal record at that time. So the danger is real. And today, as in the past, I believe that we stand in the face of 2 Americas, or maybe more Americas. And the question is, which of these Americas are we going to choose? And I just want to tell you that I want to choose the America of the indigenous people who wrote the great law of peace over the America of the generals who spread disease blankets to annihilate the native people. I want to choose that Native America. I want to choose the America of Harriet Tubman, who guided the slaves to freedom, over the America of the slave owners and catchers who roamed the North searching for people that they view as property. Can we choose that beautiful America? Yes. So let's choose the America of the former slaves who established our great public education system, over the America of the vigilantes who established Jim Crow segregation. So let's choose that America. I want to choose the America of Septima Clark and Esau Jenkins, who taught people to read and write so that they can vote. Over the America where crosses are burned in church lawns all over the South. Let's choose that America. I want to choose the America of the women who earned the right to vote over the America that disenfranchises migrants, people of color, and the formerly incarcerated. Let's choose that America. Can we do that? Yes. And I don't want to choose the America of Trump. I want to choose the America where no one is illegal, where all human beings' rights are recognized. So let's embrace the America of racial justice over white supremacy. Valerie Carr said that, concerned about this moment that we are in, Valerie Carr said, what about if this moment of darkness is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? So, what about if we're expecting something new to come out? And she says, what do you do when you're giving birth? You breathe and push. Okay? So what about it, this moment of darkness? It's about giving birth to something much more beautiful. So can we say that the Methodists and the day labor workers centers are going to come together to build this America, the new America? Can we commit to that? Yes. Okay, well, if you commit to that, then you're going to come and protest tomorrow. And protest tomorrow. Tomorrow there is a man, there is one of the legislators who is a co-sponsor of SB 4, whose family own a car dealership here in Dallas. And we're boycotting every Saturday that dealership. Because sometimes the fight is big and sometimes the fight is small. Can we do that? It's at 10 a.m., right? Is it 10 a.m., right, Salvador? So can we do that? So can we extend sanctuary to the day labor corners and the centers? Okay. So I'm going to stay here for the next 3 days so that we can operationalize all of these plans. Brothers and sisters, thank you for having my organization here.